I thought there was quite a lot in there.
Well, there's a lot, but I just don't. It's kind of obvious.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, no, yes, a lot of it. Yes, Nahum chapter 1 has a lot of obvious stuff in it, and things that for you and I we've been talking about. I mean, we talked through Jonah, Amos, as we're going through the minor prophets. Like this, I mean, the language is very similar. How many prophets actually talked to Nineveh? It was a lot. Like I was counting, and I did a search for Nineveh and for Assyria, and we got like Jonah, Isaiah, Zephaniah, Zechariah, now Nahum. God is all the time talking to these people like, y'all are in trouble, and so here's another one.
And that's significant. It's such significance that God goes out of his way to keep hollering for these people to get it together. They're not his people. Nowadays, I don't think folks understand, like, he was not the God of their nation. I mean, he's God. He's God, but in their mind, like, he's not our God. He ain't got nothing to do with us.
Right. Well, and a lot of times even I think about when I think Old Testament message to Jews, but the Old Testament is not filled with just messages to Jews. Like, again, case in point, we got passage after passage like, hey, to Tyre, and there's and I think maybe Ezra and or whatever. Like there's constantly other passages to other groups, other nations. So what are some of the things that you saw? Some of the what you would say like kind of obvious things that you saw?
The big one was that how he's going to show up for his people, to protect his people. I say this all the time. He gives every opportunity to folks.
Yes.
But when it comes down to it, he is the God of Israel, and he is going to protect his people. And so it speaks to it with pretty dramatic language and vengeance and so forth. But and that's interesting too, the wording, that he's zealous in avenging.
Yep.
Because I was looking that up. Did you look that up? That's It's like one phrase, really. Or
yes.
Some people say that, anyways.
Right.
That's so interesting.
Well, and I think I had a note in my Bible from some other time when I studied, and I had like a bracket around those words, and I put the word zealous. All those words, yes, it's the Hebrew phrase or whatever, that it's a pretty significant phrase about God, yes. Well, for me, right there at the beginning, one of the things that I caught that I appreciated was the fact, and again, I went back to several other passages, that God is slow to anger. Mm-hmm. And that is, and I did some digging. It's not just here in Nahum 1. It's Exodus, Numbers, Psalms, Joel, Jonah, like that often the prophets and other people are like, hey, God is slow to anger. God is not quick to anger.
But not only slow.
Yes, because that then connected to, then my brain went to, well, okay, he's slow to anger. And then as I was looking up that phrase, in Proverbs, it is seen as wise to be slow to anger. And then, of course, you've got James chapter 1, you believers in Jesus, you be slow to anger. But you're right, that's not all that God is. Because when you think, hey, God's going to just be real slow and he's going to let me slide and he's not going to judge my sin, like, you're mistaken. God absolutely, in chapter 1, I think you were talking.
The Lord will certainly not allow the wicked to go unpunished.
Right. It's not going to happen. He will judge sinfulness. He's going to judge sinfulness. And I was wondering what you think about this. This is my thought. My thought was, punishment for sin is sometimes in this life, but he takes sin so seriously that punishment also then impacts the life to come. And however, and we've been studying this recently, but however you view that the impact of sin impacts eternity, in that whether somebody goes to hell forever and burns, or they at some point their existence is done away with because death is the second death, is
Mm-hmm.
death. That's an impact of sin, and it's a big deal that there is not sin that you just get away with. It just doesn't happen. And I don't know,
I
this
agree.
chapter
What are
makes
you
it.
wondering about?
What?
I agree, but what are you wondering about?
No, just does my thought was that the impact of sin, would you agree that it also impacts the life to come? That
Yeah,
sin.
I'd even go further that there's some things that folks do that they seem to get away with or what have you, that God he's so upset about it that he saves it for himself to deal with.
Oh, he saves it for himself to deal with. I like that. Is ooh.
Well,
Oof.
because I would see all these folks like politicians and folks and people just seemed untouchable, and I'd be like, God must be saving them for himself.
Oh
But,
man,
well,
that
I can hold that to all of us, but I'm just
yeah.
saying.
Because Nahum 1 talks about how there's judgment, that he's not going to let it go unpunished. And I was thinking about other passages, like in Exodus. I think there's one in maybe Jeremiah, some in Jeremiah, where he's like, listen, sin is not going to go unpunished. Like I punish people that misuse my name. The guilty will be held responsible for their sin. And that's an interesting thought that no, even because we judge, we want it to happen now. We
Yeah.
want we want justice metered out now, and sometimes the judgment comes in the life to come, in the age to come, and God will take care of it, and he saves it for himself. That's an interesting thought.
Paul talks about it too, where he says there's some things that are obvious,
Yeah.
and then there's other things that it takes some time and it'll trickle out or what have you.
Okay.
So you got to hold all that in your head and heart and know you're accountable and live right. And you also have to remember that when Paul talked about some things that are not so obvious, he's talking about folks who are in power
Yes.
or in authority, and they're just not they're just not delegating things properly, and a lot of people are getting hurt by it. If and I don't even think they always do it on purpose, but God's still going to deal with it. Look at how long here in this passage we're looking at. He deals with Nineveh. He just deals and deals. It's like
Right.
the structure. He set and enforced the structure, regardless of the God or whomever was over it.
Right.
So they're accountable to him because he said do this. He said that there be nations or what have you. So like a lot of nations didn't really realize that probably, but within the Bible you see that play out. How in this Jewish in the Hebrew they combine concepts is fascinating to me. Like we talked about that when we was writing that little book. You got these certain concepts that enter
Mm-hmm.
faith and all these different wordings that we just use one word for. It's kind of
Yeah.
combined.
Yeah.
And you got some of that here when it's talking about the judgment and
Mm-hmm.
the power, and it's all combined.
Yeah.
Really, you got to think about it all together. Yeah,
So it's obvious that God is on the side of his people, and he mentions that even at the end about keep your feasts and never again shall the worthless pass through you. You're right. He's saying like,
distress will
listen,
not arise a second time. Like it's
right?
going to be
Like
dealt
I'm
with.
your
And, yeah,
like I am on your side. I am with you.
I like this whole deliverance of Judah stuff. It's really good. It's like I'm coming. It's sort of the whole concept. Wait on the Lord. I
And
will tear
even
apart the shackles that are on you. Like we're
yeah,
shackled in some ways, and He'll break it. You see how it says that right before that? Like they will be destroyed and trickle away. That's interesting. I wasn't thinking that
mm,
when I said it. Although I afflicted you, I will afflict you no more.
mm,
And now I will break a serious yoke bar from your neck. I will
mm,
tear apart the shackles. that are on you. A lot of times God's people are under, I guess that's under authorities again, or under subjugation or what have you.
Right.
It's unfair and it's not just, and what's going on is just not right. But they got to go through it. And God's here saying, yeah, but I am going to show up.
But he definitely, right. He definitely says, what was that verse about the shackles? Where are you seeing, what verse are you seeing that in?
I see it. It's like there's a little passage here, like 12, I think.
My brain's just not.
Oh, the shackle is 13.
Oh, there it is. Okay. I was just reading right past it. Okay.
But shackles doesn't shackles sounds like oppression.
Well, even the ESV says, I will burst your bonds apart. So some kind of bonds. Are you reading from the NET?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I got to amplify the message in the ESV. And I was looking at those this week when I was looking through one. So,
And I say that too because it follows up with he's speaking to the king, right?
yeah.
So he's not doing it. He ain't not doing the people right. So, but you're right. Like anytime there's like idols or whatever, it's connected to behavior. I mean,
And I'm like, why did I miss that? I just jumped over that verse for some reason.
it's because sometimes when it talks about the wicked, we sort of just think of like bad people coming in and being mean to you. But when you're talking about the other nations in Israel's day, they were like considered the civilized ones. They were the ones like Babylon. They're the ones that had.
They have the hanging gardens and the
Yeah, they're like the civilized ones.
yeah.
And they're the ones that got it together, if you will. They're not like we don't think of when we see the word wicked, we just think of like barbarians or something. You know what I mean?
Well, and I would say that and to flip that it was the Babylonians and the Assyrians, all them would have seen Israel as the backward people. And I know that because when we were going through the history of Israel and stuff, that's how the Philistines saw Israel, because they had the woodworking, and the metalworking, and they had the swords, and they viewed Israel as.
But you see the point. Wicked, you got to look at the context. You got to know the historical context.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting how I think it might have been Doc Reese that was saying, that the Philistines saw Israel, the
Wicked.
backwards people, but today, if you call somebody a Philistine, you're calling someone a backward person. So it flipped on them. But you're right. Even in the
and amongst any religious group, the other guys are like, they ain't got it right. They're
right,
being wicked. Yeah.
They're the backwards one. They're the wicked one. The other people are always the wicked ones. Are always the bad ones. Are always the ones to look down on.
Yeah.
And
the Apostle Paul went out and he was driving them out.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, and like you're right. Yeah, that's a great one.
But not the Apostle Paul yet. But you know what I mean. So
yeah, like he saw them as the heretics and things like that. And so it's interesting that God would send a prophet with an oracle, with a message from him to people that would not consider God to be their God.